Today's episode is brought to you by We Break You Buy. Interested in sports cards and memorabilia? Check out We Break You Buy on TikTok. We Break You Buy is a small operation run by three brothers, offering spots for a chance at winning some incredible sports cards and memorabilia. That's We Break You Buy. Check it out today on TikTok. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
Joining us is a return guest, Kai Wang. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me again.
Yeah, welcome back, Kai. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How about you guys?
Wonderful. Excited for today's episode.
I'm equally excited.
This is going to be a good one, I think.
I think it is, because this movie is not a classic, has really no legacy whatsoever to speak of, and yet, in the moment, when it came out, perfect criteria for why wasn't it better.
Absolutely. I mean, let's think about it. Big name, large fan base, and a lot of hype.
Huge budget.
I think adjusted for inflation, it's still the most expensive video game movie ever made.
Now, I did see a conflicting report that would be Prince of Persia.
Adjusted for inflation?
I need to double check that.
Maybe. It'd be close. Prince of Persia, another movie with no legacy. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Kai, I know, I want to ask this because Anton doesn't know this about you, but Kai's a basketball fan as well.
Yes.
Have you been watching
excellent.
NBA playoffs at all, Kai?
Been following it a bit loosely, but I've just been busy with other stuff right now. What's the latest?
Well, the Knicks, it's the most fun Knicks team probably of our lifetime if you're old enough to remember the 99 Knicks.
Yeah, okay. I knew the Knicks were on a hot streak. Yeah.
It's so nice to see them relevant. They all play as a team. They all play defense. They have a coach who actually knows how to handle tight situations.
Do you think this will last?
Do you mean this run or across seasons?
Cross seasons.
Yes, I do. I think I believe in the GM. I believe in the coach. I believe in the foundation the team has. And they're not even at full strength. They have a bunch of really key injuries that they're dealing with. And it's just so refreshing because, you lived in New York for a while, Kai.
I did, yeah.
For a solid 20 years there, they were a dumpster fire.
Yeah, but New Yorkers are going to be New York sports fans and keep supporting them. So
tragically, yes. I've often said that I want a Martin Scorsese biopic of James Dolan, but that'll never happen.
The Dolan family would never let that happen.
No, they would probably have him killed.
But
allegedly.
Cool enough though for the Knicks that this roster too is very sustainable. It's nothing there aren't any contracts on paper that are egregious or won't allow the team to be together for a few more years. So yeah, they have a good run ahead of them.
I have a crazy thing to say, and I'm not sure if you guys might want to cut this out for privacy reasons, but
we can now.
Okay. Anyway, my wife's uncle is the former president of the Knicks. And it's really unfortunate that after his departure that suddenly the team is doing well.
I'll cut that.
Probably for the best.
That's exciting.
Oh my gosh, I'll bet you he has a ton of Dolan stories. Or maybe not, because who knows anything about Dolan.
Sure. Next time I see him, I'll ask.
I don't know how we got on that. Oh no, we were talking about basketball. Sure. Out west is probably going to be Denver.
Yeah.
No surprise there. Jokic is
he's a machine.
Yeah, it's like watching a robot at times.
Yeah, he's my wife's new favorite player because she loves horses and Jokic likes horses.
He does. Yeah.
He loves horses more than basketball.
Yeah.
I don't know how to rank him all time yet because he's still pretty young in his career, but I've never seen a player like him.
Dirk?
I don't know. Not the passing.
Exactly.
Not the passing.
Not the ball movement.
That's true.
He's almost like a lankier lankier, less athletic Magic.
Okay.
Like a big man that can move the ball.
Yeah, a bigger Magic.
Yeah.
Slower.
But
Like so big it doesn't matter. Like, he can barely jump.
I love all those meme videos about him where he's like yawning and taking shots. And it just still goes in.
You know what? Like, I am kind of reminded of Andrew Bogut. Big man, can move the ball, play the point.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not like that though. I mean, I've never seen anybody like him. Like, he makes passes where you're like, what? Like, he makes passes where you just kind of laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, let's talk about this movie.
All right.
The film that we're here to discuss is Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Anton, I love how we always start to talk about the movie like the listeners don't know what we're talking about, but it's obviously in the title. So
yeah, they know.
We should probably stop doing that, or not. Whatever, we can do whatever we want.
We do whatever we want, Pat.
Yeah, it's our podcast. It's fine. Yeah. This movie, it was a big deal when it was released. That's all I can say for now.
Okay.
I will intro this for us. In the year 2065, the next great assault against an invading race of phantom-like aliens is about to be launched. Dr. Aki Ross, a brilliant young scientist, races to find the invaders' secrets, not only to save the planet, but herself as well, after her body is infected by alien particles. Can't even get through this without laughing. She teams up with the prestigious Deep Eyes Military Squadron, which is 4 people, led by her old friend Gray Edwards. Not just friend, lover. But as Aki, her mentor Dr. Sid, and Gray work out a peaceful end, the scheming General Hine devises a plot to eradicate the aliens in one swift, destructive blow, even if it destroys the Earth right along with them. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within was released on July 11th, 2001 by Square Pictures, Columbia Pictures, and Sony Pictures Releasing. Directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, screenplay by Al Reinart, Jeff Vintar, and Hironobu Sakaguchi, based on Final Fantasy by Hironobu Sakaguchi, featuring the voices of Ming-Na Wen, Alec Baldwin, James Woods, Donald Sutherland, Ving Rhames, Steve Buscemi, and Perry Gilpin. The budget was $137 million, adjusted for inflation, that is $238 million. And the box office, $85 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is only $148 million. So, Kai.
Quick note about the budget. Are we including the cost to build the studio in that?
They factored that in.
They did, okay.
They did. That was part of the budget, which was probably foolish on their part.
Yeah.
But Kai, as this week's guest, why did you want to talk about Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within?
Well, I grew up playing Final Fantasy VII, really enjoyed that game. Obviously, I didn't really understand too much of like the deeper meaning behind it at the time, but I just liked the cool effects and cool hair and whatever. And I would also say that to some degree, the aesthetics of Final Fantasy kind of shaped a lot of my aesthetic taste later in life. As crazy as that sounds.
It does not sound crazy.
No? Okay.
No. So, can I ask you, this film, did you see this when it came out? What's your history with it?
So I did. And so I didn't see it in the theaters, actually. I saw a bootleg copy where, like, people sell them on, like, the street for, like, $5, and it's, like, a guy in the back of the movie theater. So that's the version I saw as a kid. But, it was clear enough that I kind of understood it, and I was able to watch the whole thing on it. I never watched it again after that, if that tells you anything.
It does.
Yeah.
How long ago was this? Like, around the time it came out on video?
Yeah, this was 2001, so I would have been like 8 or 9 years old.
Okay. I too played Final Fantasy VII. I really enjoyed it. I remember being very intimidated by it because I had never seen a game with 3 discs before, and that was like, for 9-year-old Pat, that was like, whoa, 3 discs. I've never seen 2, let alone 1. For whatever reason, maybe either of you or both of you can explain this. That's the Final Fantasy that everybody remembers who are our age. I don't know why. I had never heard of Final Fantasy 1 through 6 as far as I know. I had no knowledge of them. I still don't. I played 7. I really liked it. I couldn't tell you anything about the story, but I loved the gameplay, like you, Kai. I thought the graphics were amazing. The style was amazing. The whole aesthetic of it was amazing. I didn't play any of the games that came after it. Again, I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. This film came out. It was a really big deal. I had a number of friends who were Final Fantasy fans who saw it in the theater. They told me not to see it because they didn't enjoy it. So I saw it probably 6 months to a year later whenever it was on HBO. I remember being blown away by the animation because it is the first film to feature photorealistic 3D animation. But I didn't remember anything about the story, and I thought it was completely forgettable, and I never saw it again until we were doing this podcast, and this got recommended to us. I can't remember by whom, but it absolutely fits the criteria for why wasn't it better, because the hype for this movie was enormous, and it absolutely bombed at the box office. And take it away, Anton.
Oh man, Final Fantasy. It's so important to note, I'm a big PlayStation fan. That was my first system as a kid. It's still my favorite system to date. And Final Fantasy VII was my first Final Fantasy game. And for a lot of folks, it was an eye-opener for what video games could be. We'll talk more about this and just the magic of video game cutscenes and maybe how that influenced this film. But when I think about my appreciation and I would definitely say big fan of the Final Fantasy series. There was a lot of hype for when this movie came out. I was still a kid, so I didn't get to go see it in theaters. I didn't necessarily think like, oh, like I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy VII. I want to go see this in theaters. It was just more so, oh, I recognize that. I did end up seeing it, but actually it was when it was being released on HBO, because at the time, family had HBO, so it was being released on HBO. And so that's why I saw it for the first time. And I remember, just like you, Pat, like, sure, the graphics look cool, but pretty forgettable. And even as a kid, I remember not liking it very much. And it made me beg the question, is this at all like Final Fantasy? So I'll just leave it at that because I know we have a lot to get into. But this was a movie that had a ton of hype behind it. And you have another person here who just had a lot of love for Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Pat, going back to what you said about why Final Fantasy VII may have been like a lot of people's first entry into it, I think it's a combination of that FF7 might have been the first one to like really differentiate itself from like most RPGs, because prior to that, where it was like just 2D and you were just walking around like talking to people and like going through dialogue and stuff like that. I think FF7 might have been the first one to incorporate like high budget cutscenes into it, where it felt like you were almost playing through a movie at times, and I think that opened a lot of people's eyes to like what the medium could be, and it really enhanced the storytelling aspect of FF7. So I think that kind of fed into itself, where people played it, they told people about it, and then it just kind of blew up from there.
That makes sense. That game is just so famous even today. It's still one of the best games I've ever played.
It's funny because when you talk to hardcore Final Fantasy VII fans, they will, like, for lack of a better word, like, they will shit on Final Fantasy VII and say it's not even the best game in the series.
I mean, I believe them, but I just don't have any experience with anything else. I'm not a Final Fantasy fan except for that game, like I said.
Right. And as a fan of Final Fantasy, like I will say, I really, really enjoy Final Fantasy VII, and it's clear why. Like the music from it appeals like to so many different people. The aesthetic, the cutting edge video game graphics and cutscenes. But we're not talking about Final Fantasy VII today, are we? Even though
we're not.
We're talking about a film that has Final Fantasy in the title.
It's funny that you say that, Anton, because we are talking about a film that has absolutely nothing to do with Final Fantasy VII story-wise.
Yeah, but there's a lot there that we can touch on, just because really, what did go on in that story? Why?
Well, yeah. Oh boy. Video game adaptations in the movie industry, they have been going on for 3 decades now, right? There's a lot of examples to choose from. Anton, I'm putting you on the spot right now because I can't remember. Is this the second video game adaptation that we're covering after Mario?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so it's been a while since we've done one. That was a pretty early episode for us.
Yes, it was.
I would say the batting average for these Hollywood adaptations is pretty low. They've gotten better in the past few years, but there's a lot of box office bombs involved. Would both of you say this is one of the most successful video game franchises of all time? Final Fantasy has been around a very long time, about as long as we're all alive.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This is 100%. A very successful franchise.
I mentioned this earlier. This film is noteworthy for being the first photorealistic computer animated feature film. It was by far the most expensive video game inspired film ever released at that point. I believe Tomb Raider came out the same year, probably had a similar budget, but for a long time, this was just known as a just like very, very famous bomb in Hollywood. Hard to believe that this film actually has a higher budget than The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, both of which were also released in 2001. Just let that sink in.
That really does boggle my mind.
Yeah. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, that will be the film that we are covering as our season finale. Pretty loaded voice cast. A lot of big names in there. There was a lot of talent thrown at this, a lot of money thrown at this. I think one of the most noteworthy things about this film is that directed by Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy himself, whose name that I really struggled with there, and I will have edited that so the listeners can't hear how much I butchered it initially. I mean, that must have been a good sign for fans in 2001. I don't remember that being a sticking point for my friends who went to see it, but I'm sure if you were an older fan at that point, it must have been a big deal.
Absolutely. It would look to me as a good sign if a studio is letting someone so close to the IP be attached to it, right? That's what you would think.
You'd think. Unfortunately, the film barely cracked $30 million in North America. It lost the studio around $100 million. It set Square Pictures back considerably. And it probably set, no, I would say it would definitely set video game adaptations back 10 years because it was nearly a decade before Hollywood invested a lot of money in one of these things again, which ended up being a film that we mentioned earlier, Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, which I have seen. I don't remember a single thing about. I know that we're going to cover it because it's on our list, Anton, but I could not tell you one thing about that movie other than Jake Gyllenhaal's in it.
Yeah, and it's so tough just because every other studio after that, whenever there was a video game adaptation, you can tell each one kind of follows this formula of reeling in, making a compromise, and not investing the budget needed to really kind of see a more proper adaptation. But until we get a film that really gets it right, it's going to be a while before we get that proper adaptation, I feel like. But that is speculation. For now, we have the case study that is this film.
Well, you just wait till we cover the Assassin's Creed movie because I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Oh, with a good, yeah.
I didn't even know there was an Assassin's Creed movie, so.
It's not good. It's not good.
It's not.
I am not a big video game guy anymore. At one point I was, Kai, and Assassin's Creed was one of my all-time favorite video games, and the movie version was pretty bad, which is a shame. But we're not that far away from 2065, and it's like, it's just hilarious.
It's still possible. What they're saying in that movie is still possible.
Right. We have to look out for
Look, we have a presidential election this year, Kai. I think if we get the candidate to start talking about the Zeus cannon now, it will be complete by 2065.
You think 40 years is enough to come up with an energy-based weapon?
Absolutely not. No. But we need to get one of the candidates talking about it. Like, look, I listened to this podcast. They told me to watch this film. What we need is a Zeus cannon.
100%.
Anton, let's get to the production history.
Let's do it.
But before we do, I'd like to take a break to hear from one of our sponsors. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. And we're back. That's right, Kai. We have some sponsors.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. Us too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the production history for Final Fantasy Spirits Within. So Hironobu Sakaguchi, creator of the Final Fantasy video games, had wanted to make a feature-length film ever since the inception of the games. He wrote the original screenplay during the 1990s, which was originally titled Gaia. His work was rewritten by Al Reinert and Jeff Vinter. Even during pre-production, the producers were very ambitious about the project, even going as far as to compare it to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, stating, quote, Snow White was the first all-color, full-length cartoon, and even though Disney was crazy, he could have gone out and hired a real actress and got some little people to play the dwarves, but he felt very strongly that there was a better way to tell that particular story, end quote. In order to keep the film in line with Hironobu Sakaguchi's vision as a director, the screenplay went through no less than 50 different versions. In one such form, there was a small child named Meg, who had a much larger part in the overall story. In the final version of the film, the fifth spirit was drawn from a terminally ill child. This is the only reference to Meg left in the final version. Other characters that didn't make the final cut include a boy named Daniel and a fifth member of the Deep Eye Squad named Robert. By early 2000, it was announced that Columbia Pictures would be co-financing the project, making it the first animated feature Columbia had worked on since the Care Bear movies 2, A New Generation in 1986. I can't say I saw that one.
Definitely not.
The first 18 months of development were spent creating the in-house software SQFlesh, which plugged into the programs Autodesk Maya and RenderMan. The majority of the rest of production was spent on animation. The basic film was rendered at a custom render farm created by Square Pictures in Hawaii. It housed a 960 Pentium, 3933 megahertz workstations. Now, character movements were filmed using motion capture technology. Hand and facial movements were all done manually. As animators did not want to use actual photographs in the film, all backgrounds were done using matte paintings. Many of the mattes were hand painted. 1,327 scenes in total needed to be filmed to animate the digital characters. Now, the film consists of 141,964 frames, with each frame taking an average of 90 minutes to render. By the end, Square had a total of 15 terabytes of artwork for the film. Now, that's a lot of data today, but nearly a quarter century later, let alone for then. Now, the film would take more than 4 years to reach completion. By the time the final shots were rendered, some of the earlier ones had to be redone because they didn't match anymore. The motion capture work by Remington Scott pioneered for Final Fantasy led directly to his being hired to create Gollum for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, cementing the use of motion capture in Hollywood. Aki Ross's voice actor, Ming-Na Wen, was selected for a perceived fit between her personality and Aki's. She initially found the work lonely, but gradually accustomed herself to it and commented the voice acting work did not take much time, as she would just go into the studio, quote, once or twice a month for about 4 months, end quote. The workload was so light it did not interfere with her acting commitments in the television series ER. Listeners may also recognize Ming-Na Wen from her voice work in Mulan, which I think she's most famously known for, as well as actually pretty recently Fennec Shand on
Mandalorian.
On The Mandalorian.
Elliot Goldenthal composed the entire score as well as the film's theme song, The Dream Within, which had lyrics written by Richard Rudolph and the vocals performed by Laura Fabian. Trivia question, what film did Laura Fabian also contribute vocals to that was released in 2001? I'll Venmo either of you money if you can guess this.
Spider-Man?
No, that was not released in 2001.
That was 2002, I think.
It was.
Shrek?
It's not Shrek.
Let me get a hint. What genre of movie was it?
Science fiction.
Was there a Star Trek movie around this time?
No.
No.
All right, what was it, Pat?
AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, would not have gotten that.
I didn't think so. Goldenthal describes the soundtrack as combining orchestration techniques associated with the late 20th century Polish avant-garde, obviously, as well as his experiments from Alien 3 and 19th century Straussian brass and string instrumentation. I have to say, I really picked up on the Polish avant-garde when I was watching this.
Yeah, that really sunk in.
Yeah, definitely. The film had high cost overruns towards the end of filming. New funds had to be sourced to cover the increasing production costs while maintaining staff salaries. The film was originally budgeted at, get this, $70 million, but the final cost ballooned to $137 million. That included almost $30 million spent on marketing by Columbia Pictures. I find that odd, as marketing is usually not included in the budget, but for whatever reason, they chose to here. An additional $45 million alone was spent on the construction of Square Studio in Hawaii. So the film went 95% over budget. No big deal. How could that possibly go wrong? Did they not have accountants?
Well,
how could a studio allow that to happen?
Well, they clearly didn't have a program manager managing their budget. Tell you that.
No.
I think this also happened during an era when these Japanese production companies were making like fistfuls of money, like just wheelbarrows of money, so they were just throwing around like it was nothing.
Yeah.
I suppose so. It went 95% over budget. That's pretty rare for films that we cover, Anton. I don't know if we've encountered that yet. Like, The Abyss went pretty far over budget. Cleopatra got out of control. This is bad.
Yeah, this is building a studio in Hawaii bad.
Why Hawaii? Hawaii's like not known for its film.
It's
Well,
because it's
production.
right in between Japan and the U.S.
I get that geographically, but like Hawaii is just known for nothing's cheap to do there.
Plus, it's also Hawaii. But
Right.
to Kai's point, the Square had a lot of money on hand, and they threw
Apparently, yeah.
and they threw a lot of it at this movie.
Well, they lost a lot of money with it too.
I also theorize that one, they didn't see this going as badly as it did, and two, they were planning to reuse a lot of the stuff gained from this project in future endeavors. And when this film was received so poorly, they were forced to kind of abandon that and any future projects they might have done with this. Because there was talks of using Aki as like the first like virtual actress or something like that.
Yes.
Which would have been huge for them if this movie had worked out, but obviously that didn't.
It did not. Square ruled out any chance of a sequel to The Spirits Within even before this film was completed. Sakaguchi intended to position Aki as the main star for Square Pictures, as you just pointed out, Kai, but it didn't happen. And this is a fun fact. Seiko sold a real version of the crazy watch featured in this movie. Used examples still sell for hundreds today. And Kai, you're probably an even bigger watch enthusiast than I am. Have you bought one yet after I sent you the eBay link this morning?
No, but I was kind of thinking about it for the sheer novelty of such a device. But I'm a mechanical watch guy though, so I probably wouldn't buy that.
Same. Yeah, it's speaking of Seiko, I have my turtle on. Yeah, I don't think I'd spend a cool $1,000 on that, I have to say.
Not on a digital or quartz watch, no.
Yeah.
No. I would make an exception for Grand Seiko, but not regular Seiko.
Yeah, you can't really classify a Grand Seiko as like a regular quartz watch though. It's used to enhance the mechanical movement, it's not the main part of the movement.
Right. I'm glad you appreciate that because I am actually eyeing a Grand Seiko quartz watch as one of my next purchases because they're just so nice.
Oh yeah. If you go to Japan right now and you go to an actual Grand Seiko store, you can get them at a steep discount because of the weak yen right now.
Ooh, it's almost worth the trip to Japan.
The difference in the cost of the watch would actually just cover the airfare, so it actually does almost make sense to fly there just to buy the watch.
Anton, you see the knowledge we get with this? These guests?
Yeah, time to go to Japan. Time to buy some watches.
Anton likes watches too.
Among other
hides
things.
it.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to go to Japan right now. But
that's another one.
That's another one.
Japan's high on my list, and now I think it just moved up.
Yeah, I would definitely try to go there sooner rather than later. For some context, I went to Japan last year, and I bought a pair of Recaro bucket seats there for half off.
I remember this on Instagram.
Yeah, I literally took it onto the plane with me because it was easier and faster and cheaper to do it that way.
You checked the Recaro seats?
I did. It cost me like $200. I was like, yeah, that's like nothing compared to how much.
That's not that bad. No,
yeah.
That's not that bad. That's awesome. Oh, that's amazing. Listeners, write this down. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about why wasn't it better. I was really looking forward to this. Let's start with number one reason, the plot and the characters. This film's plot has drawn a lot of criticism. I found it extremely difficult to follow. Kai, please explain the plot to us and the listeners.
Okay, so I think the general gist of the plot, aliens are on Earth from like a meteor that crashed a couple years ago, and they can kill humans on contact somehow. But yet, even though they are metaphysical ghosts, humans have invented some kind of weapon that can actually harm them. And I think throughout the whole movie, Aki and Dr. Sid are trying to find these quote-unquote spirits that can supposedly create some form of wave pattern that can neutralize the ghosts. I think that part is generally pretty easy to follow. The part that really confuses me is why 8 spirits and why those 8 spirits specifically. I don't think that's ever really explained at any point during the movie.
I don't think it was explained. I agree with you.
Something also wasn't explained here. Why are the phantoms attacking or trying to take over the Earth?
They aren't trying to take over the Earth. They're just here, and they're the remnants of a destroyed planet, and they're just roaming around and I think during the process of roaming around, they just happen to kill people.
They just happen to take your soul.
I think so.
Sakaguchi said that he was pleased with the film's final cut, and he would not have changed anything if given the chance. Well, that makes one of us.
I'm gonna say, well, so Sakaguchi lied.
Dan Myers from Sight and Sound wrote that the film followed the same theme typically found in Final Fantasy video games. This is where I want to hear your comments. He said, quote, "A party of heroes averts impending global holocaust by drawing on their individual skills, gaining knowledge through challenges, and emerging victorious with new love and respect for themselves and their companions," end quote. I don't think he actually watched this movie because I didn't get any of that crap.
I don't think he watched it. I think that is the most hollow comparison to a proper Final Fantasy game.
I think if you zoom out from what he's saying, you can apply that statement to any movie.
Yeah. Bunch of heroes solve a problem.
I will say this though. There's a lot of commonalities between the plot of FF7 and this. Funny enough, the idea that the planet is alive, that it's got like this blue light inside of it, aka the life stream from FF7, and the idea of like a giant cannon, and I guess monsters. But those three things are I'd say that's where the comparison kind of ends.
Yeah, this is. I feel like the comparisons to Final Fantasy VII or even just the Final Fantasy games, it's just so hollow here because there's a lot more depth to how we see the different characters in the different parties of heroes really get accentuated in the different games. You see very distinct personalities. Gaining knowledge through challenges really is like character development. These are things that are in the games that are not in the film.
Yeah, speaking of characters, I think that one of the main issues is that we never really get to know the characters at all. Like nothing about their backstory, nothing about their personality besides, oh, I'm a scientist, oh, I'm a soldier. And as a result, like it makes me like not really care whether like when Gray died at the end, I was like, all right, okay. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Sakaguchi named the main character after his mother, Aki, who died in an accident several years prior to the production of the film. Her death led him to reflect on what happened to her spirit after death, and these thoughts resurfaced when he was planning the film, eventually taking the form of the Gaia hypothesis. Kai, this is what you were alluding to earlier, where the Earth has a spirit. This is what I got from the Wikipedia article. It proposes that living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings on Earth to form a synergistic and self-regulating complex system that helps to maintain and perpetuate the conditions for life on the planet.
That's baloney.
Yeah.
What did that even say?
I'm not 100% sure. I understand the general hypothesis of it, that the Earth is alive and we need to protect it. I that makes sense. Like, sure, yeah, the Earth is. I mean, we know the Earth is like like a living thing because it's constantly changing and adapting. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, I was gonna say my interpretation, especially when you think about the film and then Final Fantasy VII, is people or things that are alive on Earth have to balance out like the inorganic and organic everything on the Earth, and that creates like the world basically. And then if there's ever an imbalance, that kind of like take things out of that system, and that's what causes like problems.
Sorry, are we talking about environmentalism or the hypothesis thing from the movie?
I don't know.
I don't know, man.
You're right. This is baloney. This is a bunch of nonsense. It's gibberish. I just found it to be, on the third time I rewatched this, it's a scavenger hunt. They're just on a scavenger hunt the whole time. They're like, we've already found, how many spirits did they find before the film starts? 4 or 5?
They had 5. She got 6 she got the 6th one in the opening scene, and they spend the rest of the movie trying to find the other 2.
Right. It's a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, they're trying to find all the Pokemon.
Same concept. They needed them to create a wave to do what? What kind of new age pagan mysticism crap is this?
I think you just quoted the Evo General guy, word for word, actually.
I am quoting him. I'm not convinced he's the villain of this film.
James Woods. Why are we hiring scientists that are trying to fight these things with ghosts?
You know what the sad part is about the plot? They were trying to explain it. There is a ton of expository dialogue that's getting thrown around here. Now, I understand you're dealing with a bunch of science fiction stuff in your plot. Expository dialogue, to a point, is necessary. But almost everything everyone in the film says to each other in the first half of the film is stuff that they would have talked about or known years earlier.
Mhm.
It's entirely for the audience's sake, and it's awkward and it's hilarious. So Dr. Sid, you might as well name him Dr. Exposition. Everything he's saying is expository dialogue. It's super clunky. Almost everything he tells Aki, she should already know. Where he's just, and this is like in the first 15, 20 minutes, when they get back from the initial raid in Times Square. By the way, that has a Seiko ad in it, which I found very convenient. I don't know if you spotted that, Kai, but there's a Seiko ad there. You're like, oh, Seiko, great. And she's wearing a Seiko, convenient. So she gets back, they scan them. She gets out of the scan, which is really convenient. And then Alec Baldwin's character, oh gosh, he has a ghost in him. We'll get to that in a minute. And then she meets up with Dr. Sid, and he's just like, you know the council will get angry if we tell them about our crackpot Gaia theory. You know General Hine hates us, and he'll do everything in our power to shut us down. As you know, the Phantom's nest is in the Leonid crater where they landed 34 years ago. Physical attacks have had utterly no effect.
Look, dude, this is... It's seriously like this is a video game cutscene. You could literally take that portion and I could just see it happening. You know what it reminds me of? Whenever you meet a scientist in Half-Life.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know, watching this movie, I couldn't help but feel like I was watching a really long Mass Effect cutscene. Like even the quality of the animation, like compared to then and like when Mass Effect came out, it's kind of similar. And like the way the exposition works in Mass Effect was kind of similar too.
So what's funny and embarrassing? I looked at a few video game cutscenes from a few games that have released like in the past decade. Like I looked at Fallout 4. If you compared that to the quality of this film, Fallout 4 actually looks a lot like really bad. So just fun throwaway for Fallout fans out there. But this really is just a glorified cutscene.
It's a 90-minute cutscene. The animation's amazing, and it's also dated at the same time. It's some of the strangest animation I've seen.
So the best part of the animation is the hair. Like I'm kind of befuddled that they were able to make such realistic looking hair in 2001, but I would say that everything else about it looks very
clunky.
I don't think clunky is the right word. It looks weightless. Like when they move, there's no weight behind it. I think that's the best way I can describe it.
The uncanny valley.
Yeah, it's weird.
I have a couple quotes I want to get back to, though. The part that cracked me up when Aki starts narrating from Dr. Sid's diary, and his response, he's like, I wrote that 40 years ago, but now I'm going to burn it because Galileo. Remember him? I paraphrase that a bit, but here's an actual line of dialogue from the film. And I'm glad both of you mentioned this because this is absolutely something you would hear straight from a video game. It has no business being in a movie at all. Quote, a phantom must have changed into the eighth spirit when it touched a new life born from our own Gaia. If so, it would have been given a different energy signature that set it apart from the other phantoms. You two could not have hoped for a better location to find a new compatible spirit. End quote. That's an actual line of dialogue from this film. It has no business being in a movie. That is straight from a video game.
Yeah, that's like a final mission. You got to find the final life form.
Yep.
Go get it.
Complete and utter tripe. Just nonsense. The final line of the film is also spoken by Donald Sutherland's character. He says, oh, it's warm. That's the last line of dialogue spoken in this movie.
I mean, you said it, Pat. He still gave the best voice acting performance.
Somehow he did.
Are you sure? I feel like Steve Buscemi was the best part of this movie.
I hated Steve Buscemi in this movie.
Oh, no.
I hated him.
He was so funny, and he stole every scene.
I'll articulate that on a bit.
I like Keith David's performance.
You liked all 3 lines of dialogue that he had?
It was the best voice acting in the film.
He is a great voice actor. I'm glad you brought him up because he is one of my all-time favorite video game characters. He is the Arbiter in Halo.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, no way. That's him?
That's Keith David, yeah.
Wow. I remember him as Captain Anderson, I think, from Mass Effect.
Yeah. He's been in a bunch of video games.
Yeah.
When it comes to the plot of this movie, this is something I noticed too. And I don't know why I rewatched this film 3 times, but I did. Most of the characters are confused in the movie. This cracked me up on the latest rewatch. Like, there's a lot of times where Gray or another member of his team, they're like, I don't understand, or that doesn't make any sense. It's like, when enough characters are confused, it doesn't help the plot.
there is a lot of just in question inflection, especially from the team. I think the first time she gets on like their ship, they're like, "Who is she? I don't know."
And you get the Alec Baldwin voice, and she's like, "Wait, Gray?" He's like, "Aki."
By the way, quick side note: Gray is literally every male protagonist for every video game since like this movie came out.
Gray. It's not the most memorable name. Gray. All right. So both of you are Final Fantasy experts. I have some questions.
All right, give it to us.
How does Aki save Gray after he gets infected? It's some kind of laser thing?
Why does someone have to be a Final Fantasy expert to answer this question?
It can't hurt.
That's fair.
I have another theory that a lot of scenes are made for this movie purely to show some of the CGI capabilities that they had, and I think that this was one of them.
I don't think that's a theory, friend. I think that's
It's very real.
It's like a tech demo.
Yeah, because I can't think of any other reason why they would have to do it this way.
So there's no answer for that. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's like I have to blast the virus from his body with a laser.
Well, so is the laser? Maybe the laser itself is made out of spirits, which is why it's able to get that spirit out of his body.
Some kind of a spirit bomb?
No, because so in the movie when they reveal that she has like the Iron Man thing in her heart, they
Iron Man thing.
when I saw that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, she's like Iron Man, but like organic.
I thought that too. They're like, oh, it's obviously a magnet that's keeping the spirits out of her heart.
So they mentioned that the sphere that they had in her heart was incomplete. So I was thinking that in the surgery scene they couldn't have been using that same light to do it, which begs the question: what did they do it with, and why didn't they do it to the other ones?
It looked like a laser. I thought. Yeah. I don't know. So what I'm hearing is there's no answer to this question.
There's no clear answer here at all.
Okay. Any of our listeners, if you're still listening at this point and you know the answer to these questions, write in and tell us. Moving on, my next question. So if people come into contact with the Phantoms, they either A, get infected, or B, have their souls taken out of their body. Nothing in between? There's no middle ground?
None that was shown on screen, at least.
Okay.
No.
Okay, moving on. I can tell there's no question. There's no answer for that. So they all need a special lens to see the Phantoms, right? Or like that flare gun thing that like illuminates the Phantoms.
Yeah.
So the Phantoms are just visible for convenience for us, the audience, right? Otherwise, they can't see them with the naked eye.
No. So there's a point in the movie where suddenly every human can see the Phantoms.
Really?
Yeah, but in terms of like movie correctness, like for the first like half of the movie, what we see on screen is what the characters see, I think.
Oh, okay.
And then the Phantoms became visible about halfway through.
Yeah, like
wait, what caused that?
They didn't explain it.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I think in the wasteland scene they just suddenly became visible, and I can't think of a reason why.
Oh, you mean when they're near Tucson, Arizona?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to get to my main question about the Zeus cannon. So we're initially told that it can destroy Phantoms, right? But then we're told by Aki and Dr. Sid that it might do that, but at the cost of destroying Earth, or at least the Gaia as well, right?
Right.
With me so far? But then when they use it, it doesn't have any effect on the Phantoms at all, and it like makes them bigger and stronger, like harder, better, faster, stronger.
Is that true? I don't remember that.
Well, when they start firing the Zeus cannon, like the big dragon giant Phantoms form, and then there's like it looks like one of the Thing creatures, but it's a Phantom, right?
Yep, the big Phantom thing at the end.
Right. So it makes them stronger?
So if I had to guess, and again, this is another theory on my part, I think that the meteor or wherever the Phantoms come from recognized that it was under attack, so it started to send out more aggressive ghosts. I think I don't think they got stronger from the beam. I think more stronger ghosts were released because of.
I was gonna say I interpret it as the Zeus cannon like riled up all the Phantoms.
Yeah.
Like it didn't actually hurt them, but it did rile them up.
They like joined forces to make one giant Phantom monster.
Yeah, they made a Megazord Phantom.
Right. Okay. So how would it destroy the Earth's Gaia?
They did not explain that.
So I want to point out too that prior to that scene, no one even knew that there was like the blue jelly in the Earth to even prove that that was a thing. So.
Oh no, shit! You're right. I
Yeah.
should have known that.
Well, that's right, and that's why Dr. Sid is so opposed to it, is because he has his own theory of it could have huge implications for the Gaia.
That's fair. He seemed like the smartest guy in the room, but no one was listening to him.
I mean, I like to think if it was a similar situation where it's like think of it like the film Armageddon. A meteor's coming, and one of the lead scientists is saying we can't use a drill to fire into this meteor because it could have implications for the Earth's Gaia.
That would be like shooting a BB gun at a freight train. By the way, Keith David also in Armageddon. Bang.
Is that the one where they send the diggers to the meteor?
It sure is.
Yes, it is.
It's an American classic, my friend. This is just utter nonsense, this plot. I have one more question about the Zeus cannon. So it seemed very big and very expensive to build that thing, right? You're building this giant orbital weapon with one purpose. It's designed to shoot an energy-based weapon back down at Earth, right? I'm assuming they can't turn it around and shoot things in space. So they put it up in Earth's orbit, and they weren't 100% sure if they could even use it. They were just like, sure, we'll build it. We'll spend a long time and a lot of money to build it, but like we're not sure if we can use it ever.
I think they intended to use it until the scientists said you probably shouldn't do that. That seems like the more logical explanation for that.
Well, so funny enough, I feel like there's so much, I mean, it makes sense. There's so much tied to video game logic here of just accept it. Don't ask questions.
Yeah. There's a lot of rule of cool going on in this movie.
One of many problems with this film. I'll probably repeat this later on, but they were clearly trying to take a lot of things that worked in video games and just cut and paste them into a movie, and that does not work.
Which makes sense from like well, it doesn't make sense, but I can see the logic. I can see the logic of it, especially from the director. Oh, we have a lot of backstory for the characters. Oh, just have the doctor explain everything in his dialogue. Or what about explaining why the Zeus cannon has to be positioned the way it is? Don't worry, the audience will be able to put that together in their own heads.
Also, if you're wondering why this feels like a long video game cutscene, it's because it's directed by Sakaguchi, who is also the director of the cutscenes for a lot of the Final Fantasy games too, I think. So I think in a lot of ways, his experience kind of steered him to making a really long cutscene.
My last question to you both is, at what point during the movie did you just give up on trying to understand the plot? For me, it was about halfway through.
Yeah, I think in the desert, I started to kind of lose it a bit. I was like, I'm confused now.
At what point did you pull out your phone and start scrolling through Instagram?
Probably when Hines opened the gate.
Oh, when he did the false flag Gulf of Tonkin thing?
Yeah. When he Trojan horsed himself? Yeah.
We'll just let a couple of them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of the characters are interesting.
They have no history, not much personality.
No.
It's difficult to connect with them and care about them. And another thing too, I want to point out is, to me, one of the hallmarks of Final Fantasy is interesting character design.
Mm-hmm.
This had none of that.
Like, so bland.
Yeah, like they look like Starship Troopers, like with gray, like gray battle suits, gray clothes, military haircuts. When I think Final Fantasy, I think of like red, blue, green hair, purple eyes, whatever. This had none of that, and I would guess that it's because they wanted to make it like more mass appeal friendly, but you lose so much of your identity from like dumbing down your character design, I think.
Yeah, and I think those are really good points for even just how do we look at this film as just a compromise. Is there was a lot of decisions on, okay, well, if it's tied to Final Fantasy and we want to appeal to a big mass crowd, and we're also trying to sell like this, our ability to like to use this technology that could be the cutting edge of the future of film. Well, why don't we tell a science fiction story that's pretty simple, and then make sure that our characters don't alienate the audience by being way too out there? And you can see a lot of that. I see a lot of influence when you say like Starship Troopers. I see that totally. I wouldn't be shocked if I found out like there's a lot of character design for that.
Starship Troopers had better character development than this film.
Oh, that's for sure. Starship Troopers also a very good film.
We're going to be covering that, my friend.
Yeah.
Because it was a box office bomb.
I'll say it right now. Audiences didn't get it then.
No. I love Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about Paul Verhoeven.
Oh, yeah.
You like that movie, Kai?
I actually haven't seen it.
Oh, it's a hoot.
I guess I'll have to watch it then.
Yeah. Talk about CGI that holds up pretty well 25 plus years later. Pretty impressive CGI for 1997.
Didn't it win an Oscar for that?
Nominated.
Nominated, yeah.
Lost to Titanic.
Valid.
Understandable.
But I guess the fact that the characters in this film were just so unmemorable is one of the least Final Fantasy things ever.
Agreed.
I was going to say, my only memory of Final Fantasy is the 7th game, obviously, and I remember more about the characters from playing that game in 1997 than I do from watching this movie earlier today.
Yeah.
You watched it today?
I watched it 3 times in the past week, including once this morning.
Pat's a glutton for punishment.
I have to say, I think the listeners can probably figure out by this point, I don't like this movie at all. I am fascinated by this movie, though. It has such an interesting backstory and creation that I really felt I felt the need to explore it as many times as I could to prepare for this. But I have not played Final Fantasy VII since it came out in 1997, and I remember Cloud, I remember Sephiroth, I remember Barrett, I remember the Avalanche organization.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I haven't played the damn game since 1997. I remember all of these things. To your point, both of you, that's how cool the characters were in that game.
I will also say it might also be because you spent about 80 hours with these characters, whereas you've spent 90 minutes with these characters. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
But to your point, a lot of colors, a lot of cool, everything about that was like cool. Like the giant sword, the gun arm, the Sephiroth's huge sword, like all of that stuff was super memorable. And in here, Aki Ross, who's probably the most well-developed character in this film, I don't really know what she does other than she's a scientist and she met a little girl who died who turned out to be one of the spirits or something. She's a scientist who works on what? Like spirit research? She's like a Ghostbuster?
And
what does she do?
We just assume she really loves the world?
Sure.
Yeah.
Ming-Na Wen, who I think did a great job of voice acting in Mulan, she sounds bored. Delivering every line she delivers is like, Gray, we've got to get to the portal. We've got to save the spirits. Everything's just boring. Alec Baldwin, too. He's not a voice actor. He has no business being in this film. It's a terrible choice. I'm not even saying that because of all the Alec Baldwin stuff that's come out in the past few years. He's just not a voice actor. Anton, you've brought this up on previous episodes where just because you cast someone famous in a film to do voice acting and real acting are not the same thing.
Yes, and it really shows when certain characters really stand out more in my memory for how well they did versus big names like Alec Baldwin. But you can see why the studio went with big names like that. James Woods, Baldwin, Buscemi. It's, again, to get butts in seats, to get people interested. James
Woods, I understand. He is a proven voice actor. He was amazing as Hades in the Disney film Hercules, which came out a few years before this.
He was amazing as James Woods in The Simpsons.
Yes, and Family Guy.
And Family Guy. He played the same character.
He did. A trespasser. Look, James Woods, not a very popular guy these days, I would say, but he was a pretty great character actor back in the day. The character he plays here, General Hein, is about as one-dimensional as it gets. His entire character thread is centered around wanting to fire a giant gun. That's it.
He's a true American hero.
He is. And this is another example of the poor writing. So he has the one moment after he does the false flag Gulf of Tonkin thing and lets in the Phantoms, which inadvertently gets the entire barrier city wiped out. He has like the one moment of self-awareness where he's like, what have I done? And then within 5 seconds, he just doubles down on the craziness. He's like, yeah, we're going to need to just blow up everything with this giant gun.
I think that he thought that he wouldn't be able to make it right, so he was like, I'm just going to kill myself. But then he saw a path to the cannon, and then he was like, okay, if I actually kill them, then this will all have been worth it. I think that was the line of thinking that he had. Doesn't make it any less dumb, but...
No. I forgot that Ving Rhames and Steve Buscemi are in this. Trivia question. Which other animated 2001 film did Steve Buscemi provide his voice for?
Easy. He played Tony Blundetto in The Sopranos.
Correct.
What?
Tony B.
Sopranos is not animated.
That's correct. It's not.
That's correct. It's not.
It's a trick.
Oh, okay.
Anton was just joshing us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer, Kai?
No
Anton
idea.
knows the answer, don't you? He is Randall in Monsters, Inc.
Oh, all these years and I never realized.
Yeah, Steve Buscemi.
Who plays the blue guy?
That's John Goodman.
Sully?
Yeah, Sully.
What a great film. Man, 2001 had some great animated films.
And then
Spirited Away, Shrek, Monsters Inc. That's probably it. Yep, so just 3. I think Buscemi has a really distinctive voice, but my problem with it is his character looks nothing like him, and it's distracting, especially now, knowing like all the history I have with him.
But Mike Wazowski doesn't look like Steve Buscemi either.
Well,
Randall does not. You're right,
Yeah.
but that's a cartoon.
I think Alec Baldwin's character looks more like Seth MacFarlane than actually Alec Baldwin.
None of the characters look like themselves.
Wait, I think I got that mixed up. So he's not the green. He's not the green eyeball.
No, he's the bad guy,
No,
Randall.
He's a lizard,
green,
right?
Yeah, green eyeball. That's Billy Crystal.
Ah, okay.
Kai, have you seen Monsters Inc?
Many times, which is I'm embarrassed I got that wrong.
I can edit that if you want.
No, it's fine. I own my mistakes.
So just leave it in.
Yeah.
This is one of the issues with photorealistic animation, though, right? When the characters don't look like the actors that are voicing them, you end up with, at least for my mind, a bit of an issue.
I'm trying. Well, the voice actor for Shepard in Mass Effect doesn't look like him either. In fact the body model and the voice actor are completely different people.
You're right. Keith David does not look like the Arbiter.
No, it's true. All right, let's just plow ahead. I see neither of you can take this seriously. I thought it was nice to hear Perry Gilpin in something other than Frasier. I'm a big Frasier fan, and it was cool to hear her voice.
Big Roz fan.
Yeah, great show. One of the only good character performances in here that I liked was Donald Sutherland as Dr. Sid. I thought he did a pretty good job. He had to deliver a lot of stupid dialogue.
Funny enough, this was actually something about. This was the closest thing to like an Easter egg or like something from Final Fantasy continuity. Is
Sid?
That each game has a character named Sid,
who usually flies an airship, I think.
Well, he does here.
Yeah,
Yep.
technically.
Yep, technically. What's the name of the ship? Because I don't remember. That's why I'm asking.
No idea. Did it even have a name?
Didn't bother remembering it.
Did, but I don't. Yeah, whatever. None of the characters have an arc. No one undergoes a change. No one really has feelings. The aliens' motivation is never really explained. They're just ghosts that take people's souls.
It's really bad. Just villains for a film, just because, just an unknown entity.
Also, ultimately, her dream sequences don't really amount to anything. I can't really think of like what do they lead into?
Nothing other than General Hine reads them and he's just like, well, we have all the evidence we need to fire the Zeus cannon. It's awful. Look, I thought the worst characterization in the film was, so right after his squad mates get wiped out, Gray and Aki decide to honor their memory by having sex in space.
Is that what they did? Is that what they did when they were floating around?
Yeah, I mean, like immediately. He was like, I just lost my whole team. Let's have sex. It's just such a boring film.
I like to think maybe that was Alec Baldwin trying to interject into the writing, saying, I think it would be great if Gray banged Aki in space, in the spaceship.
I could see that being Alec Baldwin's suggestion. Like, I know we don't record the dialogue together, but...
Sex is for closers.
Do you know how much this watch cost?
Are
they all here? Well, I'm going anyway.
I was in Beetlejuice.
That's right, he was. He's also in my favorite movie. He's the main character of my favorite movie, somehow.
Which movie?
The Hunt for Red October.
Ah.
Sort of the main character. It's either him or Sean Connery. Let's just give out to Sean Connery.
People always quote his scene in Glengarry Glen Ross, but the rest of the movie is pretty good too, actually.
Oh, it's an awesome movie.
Al Pacino was really good in it. Yeah.
Ricky Roma. Both of you are right. This is a 90-minute cutscene.
There's no other way to describe it. It there's just so many parts in it that feel like dialogue that leads up to a mission that you have to do yourself, and then you don't have to do it yourself.
I also felt like I was watching episode 6 of a 10-part miniseries where I was just like, okay, so it felt like there is a ton of story that belonged before this movie and after. It just felt like in a part of a much larger abridged story. Not that it was interesting, but it felt like part of a larger story that we never really got to see.
Yeah, I think if it had gotten more entries into the series, it might have been better explained. And we might look back on this differently, but as it is, like without any history or backstory for anyone, it's hard.
This was also a time before I think proper tie-ins, even like prologues to films releasing that maybe have a bit more lore. I feel like this could have benefited from like a video game tie-in or like a miniseries or a comic book or a novel or anything that could reduce the amount of expository dialogue.
Wasn't there a Final Fantasy game that came out the same year? Like, was it 8 or 9?
It must have been
I think it was 9. Yeah, it was 9.
And it had no relation to this whatsoever.
Nope.
None of the Final Fantasy games have anything to do with each other either. They're all like
except 10 and 10-2.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there wasn't a 10 and 11, or there was an 11, but there was 10, and then there was 10-2.
You can call it X and X2.
Don't. There's no need to explain this. I believe you. Speaking of video games, I got serious Halo vibes rewatching this during the scene when they're all in the Warthog.
Yeah. I mean, we're calling it the Warthog, so yeah. It's...
Right. Did you think that too? Like, oh, it's a Warthog. Like, cool.
100%.
That's the only part of the film I actually had any interest in. I was like pretty excited when they got in what was obviously a Warthog, but it actually, coincidentally enough, came out before the first Halo, which came out later in 2001. But it didn't last long. It was like a 5-minute sequence.
If you take the Warthog scene out of that movie and stick it into Halo, it doesn't look out of place at all.
No.
Yeah.
I was really into it.
It was really cool, and unfortunate that is one of the highlights.
Yeah. The pacing of this film does not help. It's leaden.
It's nuts because it's not, by all means, it's not a long film, but it is a long film, if you know what I mean.
There's a lot of slog to get through until stuff actually happens, which I think doesn't help.
It's like we were talking about before the recording. I asked you I clocked it. What point during the film does the Warthog scene actually happen? It's an hour into the film. The film is barely over 90 minutes. It really felt an hour longer than that to me. It was a slog. You're right, Kai.
Look, you don't catch me looking at my watch when I'm going through Lord of the Rings director's cuts.
No.
But those are long films.
No, Anton, we talk about this a lot. Runtime and pacing
very different.
Can be related, but they are not the same thing.
Yeah. This is a function of poor writing.
I could not find any deleted scenes that actually cover this, but I did find in the trivia. So the final cut of the film removes the dramatic reveal that Aki is pregnant from the dialogue. You can still see that visually when the phantom tentacles enter her body, the tentacle in her womb changes color.
Gross.
Her fetus is the 8th and final spirit, although the final cut gives the viewer no clue. When Dr. Sid says, "I understand," the audience never does. Because Gray's sacrifice to save Aki was intended to be all the more powerful when you know he's sacrificing himself, not only for the woman he loves, but for their unborn child. How would he know that? He wouldn't. This plot element was deemed to be quote unquote too Japanese for American audiences, and the result is a third act that makes little sense. I have to say, the final 30 minutes of this film, I just watched on 1.5 speed. It was brutal.
It felt like it was leading to nothing. There was just no excitement whatsoever.
Yeah, also the idea that Gray used his body as like a relay to transmit the wave, I didn't really get that. I was like...
it didn't make sense to me. That's going to bring us into the next reason why this wasn't better, which was a question. Who is this movie for? The marketability for this film was a problem from the get-go. Now, what they ended up with was a film that satisfied no one. It seemed like, according to my friends at the time, and stuff that I've read, fans of the games didn't seem to care for this film. And it certainly wasn't something that casual moviegoers were going to get through. Like, this was never going to appeal to general audience.
No, and it's very similar to a lot of adaptations that we've talked about on the podcast. There's just a lot of compromises made from big studios to try to get butts in seats and appeal to the common denominator. We saw Ghost in the Shell suffer from this, and this is just another example of that.
Do you recommend Ghost in the Shell?
No.
Okay.
Did you see it?
No, I like Cyberpunk, but I held off on watching it because it got horrible reviews. So I guess I'm just not going to see it.
I
just watch the original.
Yeah, watch the original. Much better.
Yeah.
This film, $137 million budget for an animated Final Fantasy film in 2001. It was never for kids. I think it was rated PG-13. So it's clearly for adults. That's pretty niche to begin with. They were never going to justify the budget. And it's funny that even prior to this film's release, industry insiders were skeptical about its box office viability. Chris Taylor of Time magazine wrote this in 2001. Quote, "For all of its stunning attention to detail, fantasy could still fail. Movies with video game tie-ins have a poor track record, and Sakaguchi is a first-time director on the big screen. End quote.
Look, they made the wrong film. Fans didn't want whatever the heck plot they put together for The Spirits Within. Fans just wanted a Final Fantasy VII film. And there's no joke about it. Like, the original game made like over $390 million. Very successful. And instead of jumping on that same trajectory and continuing to feed fans what they were clamoring for, they decided to make this attempt at trying to step into all of Hollywood and appeal to a mass audience. Now, they did eventually correct things, and they came out, I think it was like 2005. They made Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, and everyone was so happy when it came out. Again, not a great film plot wise. It also doesn't make sense, but hey, it had everything that I wanted. It had anime boys like Cloud. It had all of the Easter eggs from the film. It had Sephiroth. It had the music. If they could have just made a same budget film, but Final Fantasy VII instead of what we got here, fans would have been much happier, and I probably would have appealed and caught the attention of even more people.
I'll say this: if we got Advent Children in 2001 instead of Spirits Within, I think the movie industry would look a lot different right now.
1,000,000%. Minds would be blown.
Yeah.
I saw Advent Children. Like I said, I had played the 7th game, so that movie made sense to me. Now, if I hadn't played that game, I don't think it would have. But to your point, Kai, it's kind of inconceivable that they made this instead. A film with no connection to really anything. I was trying to think about how I felt when I first saw this on HBO 23 or 2 years ago, and it's like, I expected some kind of fantasy element, and this film has very little of it. It's like almost like an Aliens ripoff with some like new age ghost crap. I don't know if I felt that exact way back when I saw this, but I remember thinking like, this does not seem like Final Fantasy to me at all, because my limited experience with it was always in some kind of, no pun intended, fantasy setting, not on Earth, but with all this like mythological, fantastical elements in it. And this is like, oh, it's Earth 60 years in the future where just some aliens show up and there's a space laser.
I'll put it like this: Star Wars is more Final Fantasy than this movie.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Star Wars has, if you really break it down, Star Wars actually has every element of Final Fantasy. And I would assume that Final Fantasy had a lot of inspiration drawn from Star Wars, since Star Wars came first.
No, you're right. Star Wars is not really science fiction. It's really like a space fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good call, Kai.
Yeah, that's why we have you on, Kai.
Glad to be here.
With this kind of insight. Are we done with reason number 2? I feel like we are.
We're done with reason number 2.
Let's move on to the last reason, which is the production. This film is often used as one of the biggest offenders of the uncanny valley syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
They put a ton of work into the animation, but we get that dead-eye look in the characters, right?
Yeah, listeners may recognize that the uncanny valley, of course, is when something looks realistic but slightly but there's something about it that doesn't look real enough.
Yeah, and I think 2 of the contributing factors, one I mentioned earlier, which is the weightlessness behind like their actions. It just doesn't feel like their bodies weigh anything. And 2, I think, is nothing and no one is ever dirty in this movie until the very end when they redo the textures, I think. But if you watch the movie carefully, like there's not a single speck of dirt on anybody at any point.
That's a good point. It's because they have their souls taken.
Yeah, the whole film reminds me, it reminds me of the cutscenes from the video game Heavy Rain, if anyone here has ever played that.
Is that like street brawler game?
No, it was a pretty like interesting game on the PlayStation 3 where it feels like an RPG, but it's like quick time events to go through the story, and it's like a mystery adventure.
Oh yeah, that's the one with like that's like the detective one, right?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
And a lot of uncanny valley there. A lot of dead eyes locked in one direction. Like, these people have no souls. Why is this looking at me like this? Which was definitely this film.
Kai, I'm with you. It wasn't the dead eye thing that bothered me the much. It was the characters' movements. It was like everything's stiff. Everything's mechanical. The characters' mouths, they don't move quite in the way that what they're saying matches. Everything's a little bit off. Everything's a little too slow. Everything's a little too clunky. It was very ambitious for 2001, and I don't want to take that away from them, but it wasn't quite there yet. And like I said, I don't think it was for lack of trying. Like, I can't accuse them of phoning this in. Like, they spent a lot of money on the animation. They just phoned in the story.
Yeah. I think for 2001, they did a good job, right? And for 2001, they probably did a lot of the legwork to kind of bring video game cutscenes and this technology forward. But as a full film, it just didn't really sell it.
You know, I would be interested in going back to watch Toy Story again and seeing if the animation, like the way the characters move, is actually better than this movie.
I actually did that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
To prepare for this. And I'm glad you brought that up because I was curious about that too, because one of the criticisms that you can read about like the old Pixar movies is that they show their age, right, in the animation. And that part of that is true. And some of the animation in the old Pixar films, like the first Toy Story, it looks a little clunky in parts, and you can tell like, oh yeah, this is like very clearly like a 30-year-old film. However, the difference between that and this is that was a cartoon then and it's a cartoon now. This was trying to be photorealistic. It was trying to compete with live action. And it's much more ambitious, but it's much more risky. And that's why I think a lot of that old school Pixar animation just holds up a lot better. Like even something like Monsters, Inc., which came out the same year as this, or Shrek, Anton, your favorite movie.
Shrek still holds up.
It does still hold up. And that's a lot of this stuff in here does not for that reason. Photorealism, I don't think it was ever going to age well, but I will try to defend this film's production quality a little bit because I don't think they knew that when they were making this in the run up to 2001, right? They really thought they were being cutting edge, and they were. And I think I mentioned this earlier, is when I first saw this on HBO, I was really blown away by the animation here. It was cutting edge then. And I have to give the film credit for that. I can never fault a movie for trying something new and trying to push the envelope, which they really were trying to do here.
No, I think that's very well said, Pat. And you take the same technology and you look at what they did with Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, and I feel like that film felt a lot more natural, less Uncanny Valley.
100%.
While we were clowning on the Uncanny Valley stuff a little bit, everything else in the film I thought looked amazing. All of the non-human animation, of what you would call the production design, like the guns, the vehicles, the environments, the sets, that all looked good.
Yeah, the city is amazing.
Yeah.
It helps that they had matte paintings to build off of.
Oh, yeah. By the way, did you read those were all hand-painted?
Yes.
Amazing.
Very extensive.
Yeah. I mean, the Phantoms themselves, they look kind of cool. I wasn't exactly sure of the scale of all of them. They seem to vary a little bit, but they looked cool.
I actually have one major issue with the Phantoms, and it's that at no point can you really tell what they're supposed to look like.
No.
Because they're just a mess of like long limbs and like round bodies. They suffer from Transformer syndrome, where like there's so much going on with them that you don't really know what they're supposed to look like.
Yeah, the whole like Phantom as a villain for the film, it actually kind of reminded me, there's this anime Neon Genesis Evangelion where it's a very similar thing. Society is fighting against this like extraterrestrial like force that's, on Earth. And I find that what's so much better about that series versus this one, we talked about it, is you understand a bit more about motivation from the anime versus the villains here. Here it's so much more abstract and there's just so much more unknown.
No motivation at all.
Yeah.
No, Kai, I know what you mean. The only times you really see a good view of the Phantoms is in Aki's dreams.
And there's like a million of them, so like they kind of start blending into each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This film really, it was a technical marvel, but here's the problem, right? When you hear all the quotes about the film and all the work that they put into the animation, it's like giving Aki $80,000 or 80,000 individual strands of animated CGI hair. It doesn't make a movie good.
It's like, so what?
It's like, what does that mean? It's funny you mentioned Mass Effect earlier, too, because this was a major visual inspiration for that game. The Mass Effect creators, they mentioned using this film as a visual reference a lot.
I didn't know that, but it makes sense.
We talked about the voice actors earlier. Philip French of The Guardian has a quote that I like that applies to this. He wrote, quote, "Because we're thinking of how they were produced, we're as unmoved by them as we are by the waxworks of Madame Tussauds or by the protagonists of computer games. They are realistic, but they are not real. And their unreality is emphasized by giving them the familiar voices of Donald Sutherland, James Woods, Ving Rhames, and Steve Buscemi, to whom they bear little physical resemblance."
So
Yeah.
he echoes your sentiments then about the
Yeah.
how distracting it is that they don't look the same.
I have to apply a little bit of hindsight because I didn't feel that way when I first saw this in 2002 or whenever I saw it on HBO. But rewatching it, I was like, "That's Steve Buscemi." I was like, that doesn't add up at all."
I know what you mean. It can be distracting, but I think what adds to it, and I think that we get it from this quote, is because there's the photorealism. If this was something
Yes.
else like animation or like more anime influenced and it doesn't
Monsters
look so,
Inc. I don't feel that way about Monsters Inc.
you could probably lose yourself more.
Yeah.
I mean, even like Howl's Moving Castle, like Howl's played by Christian Bale. And I
Right.
never once felt like,
Nope.
oh man, Christian Bale, like he doesn't look like Christian Bale. But you do get that feeling here because they go for that photorealism.
Yeah, photorealism, they were the first ones to do it, right? So like I can't fault them for not realizing that this wouldn't age well. But if you look at the stuff that came after this, right? A film that we're actually going to cover later this year, The Polar Express. I don't know if you've both seen that, right?
Yeah.
I haven't.
Okay, well,
Tom
it's
Hanks.
Tom Hanks. It's a photorealistic motion capture 3D animated film. Came out in 2004. Hasn't aged well. Robert Zemeckis would get lost in that mocap land, right? He did the Beowulf version. You don't see a lot of that these days.
No.
Now, one of the reasons why I don't care for some of the newer Disney remakes, like The Lion King and The Jungle Book, is because they lean too far into the photorealism. I want in animation stuff that is not inherently realistic. That is the entire point of animation, is because you can do things that don't exist in a live action environment, and trying to reproduce that verbatim in a photorealistic environment, it's like, what's the point of animating it at that point?
I think that that's what the film tried to do here, is try to build a photorealistic environment where you can believe that like spirits and phantoms could exist. But the way that it ended up being executed is just not very well, because it just doesn't look as great as what the studio expected. And the plot didn't lend itself for us to really lose ourselves in the story and really buy into it as well. So I feel like the technology is there because video game, players can really lose themselves playing video games and be in that environment. But translating it into film really requires a different skill set.
I want to say too that I think like part of the goal with like trying to make movies with realistic animation is that if you're able to do this, then you don't have to deal with like the logistics of like moving production crews and like cameras and all that stuff around, and you actually have total control over how to shoot the scene and whatnot, which is another benefit of realistic animation.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a good idea to let Sakaguchi direct this with so much money at stake?
I think hindsight is 2020, but at the time I think it almost made sense.
I'd say yes and no. I feel like for any first-time director, or like to have a first-time director at the helm, you're not doing them any favors by not having either someone else to consult or really be able to kind of QA during the process and say, hey, like this isn't like directing a video game. So not to put that in there is almost setting him up for failure.
I haven't listened to it, but he gives a director's commentary on the DVD release of this film. I am almost interested enough to try to listen to it because he apparently speaks very good English, but I'm not going to buy it. So never mind. In an interview with Time magazine, he said, quote, "We've created characters that no longer feel blatantly computer generated. If we press on, we can achieve the reality level of a live action film, but I kind of like where we are now. It's not anime, it's not live action. It's something people have never seen before." Quote. He's talking about the Uncanny Valley because I really do respect his ambition, but it does not work for what they're trying to do here. They put so much emphasis into the animation on this film and not enough emphasis on the story. Around the time that this film came out, I do remember hearing news articles about how the characters in here were so real they would replace real actors. and instead of going to see your favorite actor, you would see a movie featuring your favorite CG character. That's the level of ambition that they had going into this. And it's funny how these things work out. Had this been a box office success, maybe that would have been pushed a little farther. But as we know, of course, with 20 plus years of hindsight, that was never going to happen.
No, it ends up, you know what? It actually kind of reminds me of really bad like Snapchat filters that you lay on top of people. When I look at the people speak, because it has that same like, oh, when you open your mouth, it's really slow or the actions look really clunky. So we finally achieved that for Snapchat filters, but they were able to get it right in 2001.
Hi, do you want to talk about the Square Enix merger?
Yeah, so from my understanding, when this movie was being made, Squaresoft and Enix, two software titans in Japan, were already in talks for a merger at the time. However, after the poor performance of this movie and the loss of like $100 million, Enix kind of pumped the brakes on it and wanted to hold off on the merger. I think it wasn't until the success of the next 3 Final Fantasy games where Enix finally was like, okay, you guys are good to go. Let's combine. So this movie had like really big business implications for Square and Sony.
Yeah, when you lose $100 million, that's a tough sell.
Well, I prefer to think of it as I had $100 million to lose.
Sure, that's a very good way to look at it.
Isn't that a bit of a gambler's fallacy?
Yeah, I'm a poker player, so when I have bad nights, I try to think of it as like, at least I can afford to lose $1,000.
Right? Is it more so? I'll make it up in the long run.
I'll get it back.
Yeah.
I have 2 final thoughts before I think we can wrap this up. Number 1, in addition to the Uncanny Valley stuff, I was chuckling at how much camera shake they decided to add to the action sequences. Completely unnecessary for animation.
Mm-hmm.
It only added to the Uncanny Valley. I'm like, wait, why is the camera shaking? Oh.
Yeah, I see camera shake as like a crutch for like when they don't want to fully choreograph a fight scene, so they like shake the shit out of the camera to make it look like they're doing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't see a reason to do this for a 3D movie when everything can be seen extremely clearly.
How much money do you think they spent on the end credits with the eagle flying through the mountains? $5 million? 10?
I would love it if they spent $10 million on that.
It's pretty awesome looking.
Yeah.
I think that ending scene is lifted from the end of Final Fantasy VII when Red 13 is running through the canyon.
Yep.
And then it zooms out to the city. It reminded me a lot of that. And then it's almost like they did it again in the opening of Advent Children, but like more high def
with Red 13.
Yeah, and his kid.
Yeah, man. This movie just reminds me how much I really like Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
The highlight of this film for me was the score, composed by Elliot Goldenthal. It's pretty amazing music.
I think that I wasn't as in love with it, perhaps. I thought it was all right. I think I was just the fact that the animation and the story were so uninspiring, the score couldn't really lift it for me.
Okay, let me rephrase this, Anton, because I don't like your negative energy here. This film does not deserve this score. This is like a score from a much better movie.
That's good. That's a good take, Pat.
Yeah, I have to echo Anton's sentiments here. Like,
ambushed.
If you asked me to hum a single song from this movie, I couldn't do it.
I couldn't either. But I will say, in almost every scene, I'm like, wow, the music's pretty good. Everything else sucks, but
to your point, I think good visuals can really elevate a song, and vice versa. And good songs can elevate some media.
The only thing I didn't like about the score was the song that plays during the end credits, "The Dream Within." I wanted to go to sleep.
So it made me want to throw my remote at the TV.
Yeah,
because it was like I watched all of that to get this. But funny enough, it actually does remind me of when you play this PS1 classic Castlevania Symphony of the Night. You get at the very end, the song at the end credits feels like a very cheesy 90s R&B song that totally doesn't fit the rest of the video game.
Like a little Boys to Men action?
Think more
Color Me Bad?
Peebo Bryson.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
PM Dawn?
Late 90s.
Throwback.
Yeah. Back again.
Poison?
Poison.
Belle Biv DeVoe?
Maybe that's what this film needed at the end. It just needs some good old R&B.
Well, if I will say this: did either of you listen deep into the end credits where another song gets played?
Did not get that far.
Okay, it's a rock song by some band. Let me look this up real quick. It's called "Spirit Dreams Inside" by Japanese rock band Leark and Seal.
Oh, I actually know that. I actually know that band.
Yeah, I know that band. So they're a fun. They did the. It was really It was a big deal when they got back together to do the opening theme for the Full Metal Alchemist opening.
Wait, FMA or FMA Brotherhood?
I want to say it was for FMA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the song they did for this one's not good.
Yeah.
Buried in the end credits, but I wanted to give it a shout out.
It's funny that they would still include it for the US. I mean, for the US release because it's a J-rock band, so not a huge appeal. So then I guess they push it to the end of the end credits.
Anton, I'm disappointed you weren't really feeling the Polish avant-garde in this score here. I really thought you would.
I think it's just because of my Polish avant-garde, like my lack of knowledge and like the fact that I'm just ignorant. That's probably it.
That's not ignorance is the wrong word.
I
have nothing else to say about this film.
Yeah.
Do we want to wrap this up?
Let's wrap it up. I think
we've said all there is to say.
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
Kai, as the guest, would you like to go first and give your assessment and your rating?
Sure. My assessment is D-, and the only thing
I'm so glad you don't like this.
And I'll say
this movie stinks.
The only reason it didn't get an F is because in some ways this served as a proof of concept for a lot of stuff that will be born from this down the line. It's kind of like the V1 of a exciting new technology, but I'd say everything else is pretty bad.
Yeah, I would say on a purely technical level, this was really impressive for 2001, but a lot of things about this don't age well. It really is the uncanny valley on a lot of levels. It's a big stepping stone for photorealistic CG animation. That's the highlight of it. Everything else about this movie is Anton. It's a borderline war crime.
Yep.
The story is a disaster zone. I understand they were trying to push the envelope in like the most James Cameron way, but they put all of their eggs into the animation basket and little else apart from the score, which apparently I'm the only person here that likes it. Shout out to Elliot Goldenthal. I love what you do, buddy. The plot was nonsensical. It's just tripe. It's absolute nonsense. None of the characters were interesting. I couldn't wait for them all to die. I was disappointed when they didn't. I was really disappointed that Donald Sutherland's Dr. Exposition made it to the end of the movie to say, "Oh, it's warm." This is nothing more than a 90-minute demo for 3D animation. There's different ways to look at it. Like, oh, maybe you could watch this as an anime film. I think it would suck as one of those. It sucks as a science fiction film. It sucks as a fantasy film. It was destined to fail because there was no way this was ever going to appeal to general audiences. It allegedly would never appeal to Final Fantasy fans. I have seen far worse movies than this, but I can't recommend it unless you're a fan of the video game and you really want to see it, or unless you're curious about animation for that era. There's no possibility that I could recommend this. There's no way that I would ever rewatch this. It is a very nice looking waste of time and money. Kai, I'm right there with you. This is a solid D-.
This film is a personal attack on Final Fantasy fans. How could you slap the face of every single fan that helped give you $381 million for the success of Final Fantasy VII and not give your fans a Final Fantasy film? All that said, we've already gone over just how much this film has no plot, just no pace. Nothing about it actually feels like a proper film. And because it was just really didn't have a chance from that perspective, we got ourselves a glorified cutscene to be released for a wide audience. All I can really say is I'm glad that they were able to advance the technology, and for the time it was impressive technology and photorealistic just animation. But at the end of the day, it just feels like gilded trash, maybe is the best way to put it. Now, of course, you can say like this really paved the way for the future, but come on, Square. Why didn't you just put out Final Fantasy VII Advent Children like we all really wanted? the money that would have attracted. I really will say, I think that if you have a novel idea like that and really get audiences excited and put this technology behind that in 2001, you're going to capture the attention of a lot of people, just like you did capture a lot of attention for people for the Final Fantasy VII release on the PS1. Because there's no reason why that should have been as popular as it was in the US, but it ended up capturing a lot of attention. So with that, for me, this film's a D-. That's it.
It's terrible. I've seen worse, though. I really have.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is like, this is the perfect example of what happens when you try to please everyone, you just end up pleasing no one.
Exactly. Huge compromise.
And Kai, just so you know, we are going to be covering Final Fantasy VII Advent Children.
Oh, I would love to be there for that.
We will have you on for that.
Beautiful.
That was direct to video, right? I believe
It was direct to video.
It was never in theater. Yeah,
but they had theater releases.
Yeah.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, they had limited theater releases, not during like the original theatrical run, but just like, oh, like now this weekend, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children
they
theaters.
pulled a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny.
Yeah, I mean, I think if like every now and then I've seen like, oh, in theaters now, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children.
Okay.
Like very, very rarely. It has its cult following.
That's
if I'm not mistaken,
a stay-at-home.
if I'm not mistaken, too, I think they released it to coincide with Crisis Core, the PSP game.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, that was a great game, by the way.
I remember the PSP.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, classic.
Kids nowadays, what's a PSP?
I have no idea what Crisis Core is. I just lied.
Oh, you're missing out. Main storyline featuring Zack.
It's the prequel to FF7.
Oh, that actually sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Does it involve the Avalanche Corporation?
No, this is before Avalanche is even formed, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'll get on that.
Yeah. Yeah, they actually just re-released it for PS5, so it's a good time to get into it.
Oh.
Or you could play it on the original PSP. You'll just need a UMD of it, which is, of course, the Universal Media Disc.
Noted.
Which is so universal because it only plays on the PSP.
Yeah.
Sounds very universal. All right, that is it for Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Kai, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast again. It's been an absolute pleasure. This was a lot of fun to talk about. A lot more fun than the film.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you guys again for having me.
Yeah, love having you on, Kai. You know you're always welcome, and we'll have you back again soon.
Love to hear it. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen. Well, that is it for this week's edition of Why Wasn't It Better? We will be back next week. Anton, it's a bit of a switch up. It's going to be a World War II film.
Yes, we are saying hi to our friend Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Kai, it's going to be a Tom Cruise World War II film, Valkyrie.
Oh, wow. I forgot that movie existed.
Most people have. But we decided to cover it because it is about to be the 80th anniversary of the events depicted in that film, the July 20th plot to kill Adolf Hitler. So anytime anyone tries to kill Adolf Hitler, we are going to talk about it. But anyway, we will see you next time on Why Wasn't It Better? And until then, take care. Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better? If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.